Hey everybody, John here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to basically go through how I did my floor mat for my 1941 Chevrolet G506 truck. It's pretty easy. We're going to make a template, and once we make this template, we're going to put this in the truck and then trace everything out where it needs to go before we make the final cuts on our actual mat. Okay, so we essentially got our mat put over the top of our paper, and we're going to trace the rough outline. So we're going to go around the outsides here and cut the paper to the size of this floor mat. All right, with our paper cut to size of the floor mat, keeping in mind that the floor mat is slightly oversized, there will be some floor mat that will ride up the side of the cab. So what we need to do is find the center of the material, which I found here. And I believe, if I remember correctly, it was 23 1/4 is the center of my floor pan. All of my measurements that I'm going to use when I cut is going to be based off that center so that I can find the right locations and not have to worry about the sides of the material being too long or too wide and then my holes ending up in the wrong place. So the next thing I'm going to do now is mark out and measure on the truck exactly where the items like the transmission shifter, my high-low transfer case levers, and my front axle levers with my emergency brake, where those are mapped out on my floor. So I'm going to go do that. I'm going to put them on the paper. Now that my floor mat is tentatively in my truck, I've cut all of the locations where I measured, and now this is where we get the true test of how good our measuring was or how consistent our floor pan was with where we want to put those holes. So first, I'm only going to create slits, realizing that when I do the final mark on the correct floor mat, these are going to be just slits, and the material will be heavier, won't tear and fray like you're seeing on here. So that's okay. It's not a big deal if the paper tears, just so it's, when we get a consistent cut, it comes out right. My transmission was off a little bit because it does ramp up to the center. I didn't account for that curvature, so I'm going to have to trim this back slightly. So that'll be a little modification. On my gas pedal, came out just about right, and my clutch pedals came out a little bit too far up, so I had to cut those back slightly as well, and so did the high-low switch for the high beams. So this is my draft template, I guess you call it. So what I'm going to go do is make those modifications and then test fit it one more time to make sure that it's ready to go. Floor mats are expensive, paper's cheap. So to make sure that we're not doing this wrong, I made a second template with all the modifications and changes I made from the first draft, and this should be my final draft. So I took the old piece of paper, retraced, and included where the new positions of the holes are. So we're going to get those cut. We're going to test fit one more time, and if everything lines up in a better position, we'll be ready to transfer this onto our floor mat. One thing I like to point out is that on these floor mats that are pre-die cut, they do have locations for where all your pedals and shifters and levers need to end up. I'm not a big fan of that because every floor is slightly different regardless of how cookie cutter they think they are. So for our purposes, I'm just going to show the difference here of where I measured versus where they came out on the floor plan already. Some of these are close, right? So for example, where the accelerator pedal sits, you can tell it's pretty close to where that bar sits, but the accelerator linkage is a little stiffer. Dimmer switch right here, not quite the same. And where these holes are, not quite the same either. Might go a little bit lower. They're close, but depending on what kind of cut you're looking for, that may be a problem because it will create wrinkles in your floor mat. So as long as when you put the paper up in your cab that it didn't create wrinkles in your floor, then you're good. But if we go and use these pre-existing holes, we may end up having the wrong position. So what we're going to do is we're going to start getting these cut to where our template is, and then once it's done, we're going to test fit it in the truck. We finally fitted our final floor plan, and it looks pretty good as a template. We have our shift levers, which look really good in the position. Transmission is right where it needs to be. There's really not much bowing, and if it is, it's just the curvature of the floor and a little bit of the puckering of the paper. But our gas pedal looks really good. It's all lined up there. And our clutch system. So as you can see, what I did is I ended up taking one slit and I went all the way over, and I went through the 3 different holes between your brake pedal, your clutch pedal, and the steering column. So I don't have to have 3 individual slits going all the way up to the top. So that will help us reduce the amount of flimsiness of the floor mat. It'll just make one cut to keep that top piece a little stronger. So we're ready to take this and transfer it onto our carcass of our floor mat and get ready to cut. All right, the floor mat is in. All the cuts have been made, and pretty happy overall with where all the placement with the pedals came out to be. Accelerator pedal. There's a slight little bump right here, but that may work out with time as well as the floor mat starts to warm up and sit in the hot sun and bake a little bit. But overall, like the shifter holes and the slots all kind of came out. That tiny little spot right there in the back corner, we will end up taking and nipping that and making a little slit, so that's a relief cut. We'll do the same thing on this side where we have a little bit of a little bump up too, and we'll make a relief cut. And then we do our final cut on the pins that hold the floor mat. Just make a little X. That way it gives it some room there, so you just flip it over it and it should hold it. Excuse the squeaky door. And other than that, that's pretty much it. So if you can do this, then you can put a floor mat in maybe about an hour and a half. Pretty easy. Follow me for more questions.